And I assume my mic is on. Everybody can hear me? Fantastic. Can everybody see me if I'm on the floor? Great. We have two things in common, all of us this morning. One, we've all benefited from the remarks of Cora, which I think taught us a great deal about her life, and through that, our life. Secondly, we are all leaders. Whether you're responsible for a group of 100 or more, or whether you're a team of one. In your position and in your role within your organization, you're expected to identify issues and move them forward and resolve them. That's what leaders do. Now, for the most part, leadership is quite rewarding, fulfilling. But there are times, there are those moments, I think that we've all faced, where you get an email, or you answer the phone, or someone comes to your place of work, and following that exchange, you have this sinking feeling that you don't know what to do. You don't know how to resolve this issue that has been brought to you. That's when leadership is not as fun. And what I'm going to provide some insight to are 4 items that I use and have learned over the years to use that help me when I'm faced with those most daunting issues. And by the way, those 4 are all in this box. Those 4 are all more or less household items. I'm going to pause here because many of you are starting to scribble something different on your guesses. That's right, we've collected. So we're going to take the closest as we go through. And those that are the closest will receive this highly coveted Clearwater Lobster USB. And I would mention sustainably harvested, which is important. So, what are those 4 items? Let's start with the first and most important. Just got to bring this box down here. And that is a compass. Now, I think we all understand why a compass is important, particularly if you spend time right outside of the city. And compasses are absolutely critically important to survival. But they're also important to our individual wealth and well-being. Now, this is not to say when I talk about a compass, because compasses, we all know how they work, they all point in the same direction, true north, which gives us the guide. I am not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that we should all be the same. As a matter of fact, that's what makes organizations strong and resilient. Diversity, differences in point of view, and outlook, and style. What I am suggesting, however, is each of us has an internal compass. You heard Cora. It's clear that Cora has an internal compass, and she is in touch with that compass. And so what I'm suggesting to each of us as leaders is we need to understand ourselves, our internal compass, and we have to be in touch with that. Absolutely critical. And when you face these daunting challenges, the first thing you turn to and should reflect on is what are my beliefs? What are my principles as I look at this challenge? Now, what is interesting about leadership, particularly as you take on more senior leadership roles, is the issues you're going to be faced with are ones where there are no guidelines or precedent to follow or policies to reference. Your organization is going to be looking at you to provide leadership and take it through this particular difficult task or issue that's ahead of it. And when that happens, you're not alone. You look at the Globe and Mail, report on business, every day, and there's going to be a story about executives or people that went through very challenging times. This morning, HP blames $8.8 billion write-down on fraud. Well, wouldn't you like to have been the person that was responsible for writing that deal or signing off on that deal? Next one, BlackBerry 10 comes into focus. How would you like to be with RIM these days? And all the focus and pressure which is on an organization that was once at the top of its game, and now people are questioning whether it should be in the game. So the more senior you are, and the more daunting the tasks, and the more uncertain what you should do. But you're being asked to provide leadership. Now, you don't have to be the CEO, you don't have to be an executive. Any of us can be asked to do this on important matters. And what is most important, and why this compass is critical, and your internal compass, is because there are no policies, there are no guidelines, and in many cases no precedent to follow, you're the person people are looking at, and you have to lead. And the way you lead, and why this compass is important, it's through being authentic. And I won't keep referencing Cora because I'll embarrass her. But it's clear that Cora is authentic. Just from the brief remarks in the last hour, I think everybody has a good sense for who Cora is, what she believes in, what she's passionate about, and probably somewhat predictable, if you've got to talk to her a month from now, what she is likely to say or how she is likely to act in a given circumstance. Now, I've worked for many leaders over the years, great leaders. Some of them were directive. Some of them were collaborative. Some of them were warm and embracing. Others were cold and distant. But the one thing they were, because they were good, great leaders, they were authentic. Which means I could predict from 1 month to the next what was going to be important to them and how they were going to move forward based on their principles. Some of their principles were customer service. Some of their principles by an individual may have been we're going to focus on our employees. Others wanted to focus on the financials. But they were consistent. They were authentic. They were in touch with their compass. Now, again, why is that important? It's important because particularly when you have issues that are unique to the organization and you're the leader that's being looked at, you're going to have to draw others, because most issues in business, the ones here and the ones you face, as much as we'd like to think, cannot be dispatched and dealt with in one meeting. It's a series of meetings. It's groups of people that have to come together because we're dealing with some of the toughest issues that you've been asked to address as a leader. If you're authentic, you may not have the answers. How could you? In many cases, these problems are unique. But if you're authentic, people will trust you. And if they trust you, you will have influence. Why is influence important to a leader? Why should it matter? If you're a leader and you have authority in your organization or stripes on your sleeve, why should influence matter? Why can't I use my position power to make decisions? Well, here's a cautionary note on leadership. If you have the authority within the organization, do not use it. In my career, I probably only used my position power once or twice. Only because I thought major damage was going to be done to my organization if I did not step in and use my position power. Short of that, I never use it, and I recommend leaders do not use position power. Rather, if you're in touch with your compass and you're authentic and people trust you, then you can move your organization forward, align groups of people across different disciplines through influence. And that is how you move forward. And that's really one of the interesting things about leadership. And as you advance through your career, the more senior your leadership role, the less power you have to influence, the less power you have to make changes in your organization, and the more opportunity there is for you to influence. And that's what you have to move forward with. So that's on the personal side, on the leadership side. However, before I put the compass away and go to the next C, your organization, which is a composite of individuals, a composite of compasses, also has a direction that you need to understand. It has a compass. And you have to understand that in the context of providing your leadership, moving the organization forward and addressing issues. Now, most organizations try to be quite transparent about its compass because they have charts on the wall, or they've said these are our values, or this is what we believe in. I caution you to read those, not discount them, but validate them through the organization's actions. Because there are times, regretfully, when the words of an organization and the actions of an organization are not aligned. So the best way to gauge the compass of your organization, the organization in which you would be operating and leading, is by its actions. And what I often do with the organizations I work with when I'm assessing just where we are as a group, I often wonder, what would my organization do if there was a shortage of resources? So all our businesses are different. There are different resource requirements, but let's say it's capital, money, customers. Who would the organization disappoint if there was a constraint? Would the organization disappoint its customers? Would the organization disappoint its employees? Would the organization disappoint its owners by saying perhaps we're going to take a smaller return in the next several cycles, but we are going to put more money in the front line to serve customers. We are going to provide employees, right, with wage adjustments and benefit improvements. Or with a scarcity of resources, would it be we're going to maintain profitability, but we're going to also maintain frontline service, but perhaps cut back on some of the benefits? Or would they cut back on the frontline service? So by actions, and quite often when I'm looking at organizations, I ask myself the question, what would this organization do if there was a shortage of resources? Answer that. That gives you a pretty good understanding of the compass of the organization. If that aligns with the words, right, as posted and the mission statement and so on, that's good. If it doesn't, I would move forward with the actions. Also, how would you describe your organization if it was an adolescent? Would it be outgoing, right, self-centered, embracing, right, shy, reserved? That also gives you a sense for the organization and the context. Now, why is this important? Because as individual leaders, all of us in this room, if your compass and your organization's compass are aligned, and this doesn't mean 100% alignment, but if they are aligned, you both grow. You as an individual grows, and your organization grows. If there is not alignment, you both become weaker. The organization is weaker, and you as a leader are weaker. Now, I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that when you go back to your place of work and you're reflecting on this and you go, I think I understand my internal compass, and I think I understand the organization's compass based on its actions, and they're not aligned. I wouldn't be overly alarmed by that. And the reason I'm saying it is this. Long term, that's a problem. In the short term, organizations evolve actually much faster than individuals. By that I mean an individual compass is going to be there. It's going to change perhaps over time, but not a great deal. Organizational compasses change actually much more frequently. Because either that's because the CEO or the senior leaders in the organization, which have a great impact, right, on the organization's compass, change, or the organization evolves in terms of different markets, different geographies, and therefore needs different leaders. So I wouldn't be disheartened if you do not have alignment, because organizations change. Secondly, if you don't have alignment and you say, you know, this is going to be a problem because longer term, I'm not going to be as strong, the organization's not going to be as strong, look for a leader within your organization to whom which you feel you are aligned, and spend more time with that leader, and ultimately, right, depending on the circumstance, try to report to that leader. Because organizations can have a compass, but also individual leaders do. And you can have a strong individual leader within an organization that perhaps its compass is radically different, but a strong leader whose compass is aligned with yours. So work together. But longer term, your compass and the organizational's compass should be aligned. Both benefit. First C. The second C is going to be a little frightening for some. And that is a calculator. Why is a calculator important? And I got a big enough one for the room so everybody could see. Because issues that we're facing now as leaders are far more complex. And in many cases, understanding, becoming comfortable with the numbers, financial statements, is critical to seeing your way through to a solution. Now, I'm going to just go with a quick show of hands, and I'd ask people to be candid. How many love financial statements and accounting? Good for you. Scott, hand right up there. And how many are frightened to death of financial statements and accounting? Okay. So it is important that we get to know the financial statements of our organization and become comfortable with them. Now, I'm not suggesting that you can do a quarter end. Not at all. But it is important that there's a certain degree of comfort and understanding of the numbers within your organization. And there are a number of people, and I really compliment those that were brave enough to put up their hand to say, you know, numbers make me uncomfortable, because I think there's quite a few. So I watch some people and they put numbers into their calculator and they look at it and what it says to them is help. Please, help. Numbers can be very deceiving, and this is why it's important to become comfortable with them. Numbers are not two-dimensional. They're actually three-dimensional. But if you're not comfortable with the numbers, you're beginning a sheet of paper, two-dimensional, with a lot of numbers on that page, and you're going to think those numbers are absolute. They're not. Numbers can be very helpful and can be very problematic and deceiving. So beginning to have a common understanding and a comfort with the numbers or the financial statements or how your organization operates is going to be critical to you as a leader because so many issues touch on that. How do you go about doing that? Well, for those that love accounting, you're already there. For those of you who don't love accounting, what I would encourage you to do is seek out someone who is not in the finance area, right, but who you see is someone who's on top of the numbers, someone in operations, or perhaps someone in marketing, someone who you, right, have observed in meetings and they seem very comfortable with the numbers, on top of the numbers, and can talk, right, in an informed way about them. Seek them out. Sit down with them, meet with them and say, I noticed this, and I would really like to have a better appreciation and understanding of the financial statements or the numbers within my area. And they'll be more than willing to help you and guide you, because they were like you at one point, seeking to understand what those two-dimensional numbers were really saying. And actually, it will get better. You'll start to get some insight. And if you're in a public company, look at the annual report. At first, it'll feel like a foreign language, but hang in there with it. Ask some people, about the income statement and the balance sheet and so on. And slowly, over time, you'll start to get an appreciation for it. Nobody suggests, and I certainly don't, that you need to be an expert. But become accustomed to it. Talk to people outside of the finance area about their understanding of it and why certain things are important. That will give you a good understanding of the numbers, because the issues that we're going to be facing as leaders, right, will require, in many cases, right, you to sit down and look at the numbers. And in looking at them, you want to take the right guidance from those numbers, not the wrong guidance. So you'll find that liberating. Once you get through that point and talking to people and getting a fundamental understanding, you will find very liberating. Now, let's move on now to the next C. And how am I doing time-wise? 10 minutes? The next C is a clock. I shouldn't have even had to ask, should I? Where we go right there. Is a clock. And why is a clock important? We've talked about a compass. We've talked about the calculator. And now it's the clock. Well, the reason a clock is important, because information that you're deriving to help solve these daunting issues, information is useless without action. As a matter of fact, I would go beyond useless. It's harmful to your organization. And the nice thing about a clock is you can't stop it. It prompts you to act, because it is absolutely critical that you take the most urgent items in your organization and act on them. You cannot slow down. Now, part of the challenge we have is identifying what's the most important item to deal with. Quite often when you get that call, it's in your face. But after you start to work on it, then all kinds of information comes in. I recently read an article that talked about email. And we all know the burden, right, the tyranny of email. And what this article was saying, they'd done some research. And they were saying every day, if you took all your email, didn't read them, at the end of the day, took all your email without reading them and deleted them all, you would be right 98% of the time. I'm never right 98% of the time. The clock requires us to have a sense of urgency, to move quickly, to sift through information, particularly with those leadership challenges that we have. And without that, without the urgency of the clock, we'll never get to a solution. So, keep your mind, right, on the clock. Keep moving forward, never stop. Because in my experience, I won't speak for you, but in my experience, when I slow down, that's when my mistakes catch up with me. Don't slow down. Don't look behind. Keep moving forward. And the clock helps you do that. Because the biggest challenges in our organization are solved by a series of small steps and decisions. So when you get that call, that email, that conversation, and you're lost as to what to do, the compass, the calculator, and then start to break it down into the small steps that have to be taken to solve it. And the clock will keep you in touch with that. And the last item in the toolkit is the calendar. Now some groans and moans. Is the calendar. Now this particular calendar is a quite nice one actually, 2013, Wild and Scenic Nova Scotia. Why is a calendar important? Because really the calendar speaks to the longer term view of the organization. It's important that our organization and that we as leaders ensure that in place has a longer term view or vision or strategy. We all operate in one form or another in a highly competitive environment. Whether we're in the public sector where people are seeking services from us and more services and fewer resources, so there's a competition for resources, or in the private sector where actually other businesses are arriving at your doorstep interested in attracting your customers. It is important we have a strategy moving forward. Because if we don't have one, others do. And it's those others, right, that will take your customers, right, and take your future. So a calendar really represents a longer-term view of where you're going as an organization. And it's with that calendar and the longer-term view that you'll be able to put in context the issue that you have before you, because it has to fit within that context. Critically important. And I'm just going to move fairly quickly here now. So those are the 4 leadership tools. Compass. Know yourself. Be authentic. With authenticity, you have trust. With trust, you have influence. And influence allows you to lead through the most complex environment, not power. Calculator. Become comfortable with the financials. They'll be a part of any complex issue. And I know for some, it's frightening. Start slowly. Again, ask some people that are not accountants to help you with that. You'll find that quite liberating. The clock. Identify what's important. And move. Constantly move. Lastly, the calendar. There has to be a longer-term path. And that will be absolutely critical to guide the decisions that you're going to be making as a leader. So, with those 4 tools, the next time that you get that call, the email, or the visit, and you've got that sinking feeling, I do not know what to do, think about those 4 tools. Think about how they can help you, either in combination or separately, moving forward. So thank you for listening. Then we have questions. And then we're going to speak to Lawrence, who's been gathering to see who
Okay.
the winner.
Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you, David. That was awesome. I'm up here because I'm not mic'd like David, so I need the microphone. But there will be time for just a few questions if you have some. And David has his giveaway. I have to tell you two things. One is that, David, were you really speaking directly to me when you were doing that? Because I felt like he was talking directly to me in what he was talking about. Every single thing you spoke about, I could take away, I could relate to, and I think others in the room could as well who are with me here today. And secondly, I would never have guessed those four things. So I don't think...
I know there was at least one person that heard me speak about this before, right down the corner.
So I'm not sure if you'll ever be able to find the number of people for the virtual lobster USB that you have who would have guessed those four things, so I don't know how you're going to...
Well, I'm going to ask Lawrence, what's the... we've got two, good. I know what I'm going to do, but are there questions? We're gathering questions?
Okay, do we have some questions? Maybe while you're gathering those, I can begin with one to get us started.
Yes.
Clearwater is huge in our community, and we often hear from others of the leaders, and I'm really pleased to hear your perspective because you're fairly new with Clearwater, so
yes.
You'll come at it a little bit different. What role has innovation played in Clearwater's success from your perspective?
Actually, I think in many respects, Clearwater's foundation is innovation. The company was started in 1976, John Risley, Colin McDonald, by a pickup truck on the side of the Bedford Highway, and they saw an opportunity to take a product, a commodity, that was being sold in this region and start to sell it in another region when the currency differences, that was the US, when the currency differences were such. So that's a form of innovation, really, and creativity. Where can we take something that's common here, move it to a different market logistically, and make substantial margin on that business? And from there, they just continued with that. We were talking last night, actually, about some of the innovation, because one of the issues is with lobster, a live product, let's say moving into the US, that market later in Europe, but we'll deal with the US for now. There's lobster seasons, so sometimes the lobsters are available, and sometimes there aren't when the lobster season isn't open. So what do you do when you've built a market that has constant demand and supply, right, which isn't readily available in all the months of the year? Well, what they did was built lobster condominiums. So they bought a lobster during the lobster season, sold what they could, and then put the remainder in condominiums, and then drew down the condominium, right, during the rest of the year when the lobsters weren't available, so that the customers, there was a ready supply of lobster, whereas before it was only seasonal. That was innovation. Then moving product, now if we go to Europe, this is a long answer, I'll stop here, but when you take a live product to the US, that's one thing because you can truck it down within a certain number of hours, 24 hours. If you're going to move it to Europe or Asia, a live product, that's a very different logistical challenge. And that was overcome as well. So innovation has and will continue to play a critical role in Clearwater.
Yeah. I think it's something we all need to embrace and practice. This is one about the tools. Do you think it's possible to get the tools after the problem or challenge is presented?
Do I think it's
possible to get the tools after the problem or challenge is presented?
Oh, absolutely. If I understand the question correctly, I think it's when you get that challenge. As leaders, most issues that we face, we don't need the tools. I mean, we instinctively just draw upon them. It's when you get that overwhelming issue, right, that, as I say, stops you in your tracks and you don't know where to go. What I encourage you to do, and what I do, is pause, I stop, and I reflect on those four. So you don't need them in advance. You're probably instinctively using most of them. There was nothing new that I said. But what I would encourage you to do is when you have that stop and really think through it. Okay, what does my compass say? What's my organization's compass say? What are the numbers telling me here? How can I move this rapidly? Because these issues are quite large. How can I use the clock to manage this? And how does this align with the long-term direction of the organization?
Break. Here's Brad to thank David on our behalf.
David talked about defining moments. And that's when a leader has to choose, sometimes between what's right and what's wrong, but even a more difficult decision is choosing between what's right and what's right. And those are the most difficult decisions any leader has to make. And David, you told us that in order to make those kind of decisions, we need an authentic internal compass. You talked about trust, and for those of us who know David, he is one of the most trusted people in the province of Nova Scotia. And number 4, if we don't have the 4 C's, we don't have a strategy. And if we don't have a strategy, then others will take our future. I'd like to give just one short example from Scotiabank. Scotiabank has one of the neatest taglines called "You're richer than you think." Now, I have a friend at Scotiabank, and her daughter was asking for one of the most expensive formal dresses for high school graduation. And the mom said, "Honey, I'd really like to do this for you, but it's really not in the budget." And she said, "Mom, you're richer than you think."